Good evening. Welcome to Merit TV Canada's Election Watch. My name is David Craig. Hope you are doing well. We are fresh off a couple of big debates that happened this past week. Wednesday with the French leadership debates, as well Thursday with the English debates. There's a lot to go over. There's a lot to connect about in regards to this election, this snap election that we are on the path for. Voting is April 28th. Just a reminder, you can also vote today and over the course of this weekend for all of the advanced polls. If you have not done yet, I would urge you, go out and use your voice. Use the tools that we have at our disposals in this democracy to elect a government that you think should go forth here in Canada. So we have a lot to go over. We're going to be joined in the latter half of this program with a good friend of mine, Rupa Subramanya. She's been on several times. We're going to go in depth about some of the Liberal policies, about what we can expect from the Conservatives, as well looking in a couple of the other parties and to what they're going on as well. One thing that I want to bring up that's been on my mind, and we're going to be looking at this going forward, when we look at each party and the policies that they bring forth, a lot of citizens, to be honest, don't really read the full platform of what each party is going for. A lot of times they are heard through campaigns or slogans or promises. But I want to ask the question, are we past what is being said through we're going to achieve this, we're going to achieve this, we're going to bolster the Canadian economy? Mark Carney has said things like he is going to focus on energizing the economy and growing it, which is different from what Justin Trudeau has said. Pierre Poilievre has said things about creating pipelines from the east to the west in Canada, getting our energy out using common sense. So a lot of these big phrases. But the thing I want to propose to us as Canadians is that we are in an interesting position as a country. We have seen policies, maybe we've seen a lack of good policy being put forth in the last 10 years, and we are in a position where it is vital that the government forges a new path to be able to bring a new economic viability to our country, to see different sectors be energized. How are we going to attract investment into different areas of our country? What are we going to do to actually build up our per capita GDP in our country, which essentially means the buying power that you have, what your paycheck is worth? We have been dropping over the last 10 years. Canada, we have all the fundamentals, the right things in place to be a wonderful, amazing country that is one of the best places to live on earth. But we have been moving the wrong direction. So all of that to say, are we in a position where we should be requiring from the different political parties who want to form government an actual plan? Here's step A, step B, step C. Here is how we are going to, not just what are you going to do, but how are you going to do it? Because it's easy to make promises. It's easy to say things like, we're going to take 15% off of the middle class taxes. We're going to make tax free, like Conservatives are promising. For seniors who make $34,000 or less, that will be tax free. Or things like what Mark Carney has promised. Well, we have to fundamentally reimagine our economy. I know we've got platforms that we can read through, but I want to see real plan. A real how, because we need real change. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. So a very important question that we're going to talk with Rupa in just a moment about is, if the Liberal Party, which polls are showing, it looks like they potentially could form a majority government, can we expect a new Liberal Party? Can we expect something different from what has happened in the last 10 years? Why? Because it is the same party. It has a new leader, though, in Mark Carney. So how much difference is that going to make? Or is that not going to make any difference? Are we going to continue down the same path that we have been on? Or Conservatives, if they all of a sudden pull a surprise, or they pull a rabbit out of their hat with people going to the polls and the ground game that they have been on in terms of mass amounts of people showing up for rallies, show up at the polls, and there is this conservative wave that shows up. Are they going to be fundamentally different from what the Liberals have done over the last 10 years? These are some of the interesting things that we have to figure out, because as we look through to these parties, for example, Mark Carney wants us to become an energy superpower, but he's also a massive proponent of advocating for climate action and net zero and policies that purport that. Those two seem a little counterintuitive if we want to be an energy superpower with what Canada has for natural resources, but at the same time achieving things like net zero. They seem to actually be counterproductive. So that's why it's important to know, yeah, I understand the promises that you're making, but how are you going to do it? The last Liberal government, of all the promises they made, I think they actually came through on 3 or 4 of the promises out of 30 or 40. That's not a good track record. We need to, as Canadian citizens, I believe, step up our game and expect more from a government, not just promises so they can get into power, but I want to see how are you going to achieve this. If we can change our mindset and look forward to that, then we can do our job as citizens to holding the government accountable to things they do and the plans that they set forth. Anyways, a lot of things that go forth. Would you stick with us? We'll be right back after this break. Well, welcome back to Merit TV Canada's Election Watch. I'm joined by a friend. You guys know her well by now. Rupa, thank you for joining me again today. How are you?
Thanks, David. It's great to be here again with you.
Well, we continue to evolve along this election watch. Interesting to see results from debates the last couple of evenings as well, to see these policies taking some shape as we have the parties starting to talk more about what they're going to do. I do have a couple of questions I want to get to you on, because there's this thought that's been on my mind quite a bit, that during campaign you hear a lot of slogans, you hear a lot of ideas, you hear a lot of concepts, right? For example, Liberals, one of the concepts have been, we need to unify, let's unite, and we need to fight against maybe some ongoing outward pressures. Pierre Poilievre, common sense, he wants hardworking Canadians to get what they deserve, those kind of concepts. And I'm wondering if during election campaigns that is acceptable anymore, meaning I'd like to see personally more and more tangible plans about solving real issues, about what our government's going to do to maybe like revitalize our economy, get different catalysts in aspects to build Canada into a better, stronger place. I want to know your opinions. First off, do you think any party satisfies the idea of here's an actual tangible plan, here's what we're going to do, or are we still stuck on the idea of here's general thoughts that are really good that are going to help our supporters like what we're saying? What are your thoughts generally?
So David, I'll answer that question, but first, I want to I want to say that, do policy platforms actually make a difference at the end, in the end, right? I feel like they're basically, I've witnessed so many elections.
Yep.
They're basically like background noise. I feel like that's what it is. They help shape narratives in debates, their talking points, but I'm not convinced that they actually end up getting votes. But where they can make a difference is, say, if you're in a minority government, when you don't have any single party winning outright, these platforms then become some, bargaining chips, right? So the Liberal NDP dental care plan, if you remember from back in 2019, or the 2021 election, sorry. So I feel like, I think policy analysts and journalists. Sorry, my cat is in the frame again.
No problem.
He really missed me. So
welcome back to the show.
I think that I feel like most Canadians, pay some attention to policy platforms, but I don't think they actually read them to the extent that that it's going to decide that they're going to vote on these platforms. We live in an era of vibes, right?
Okay.
And no one's going to look at a 100-page PDF. Maybe I'm just very cynical. But having said that, I do think that there's certain things both parties have promised that are quite interesting. But what I'm focused on really is, since everything is about Trump, my question really is, what are you going to do about Trump as far as the trade situation is concerned? The Liberals, continue to double down on this notion that Trump is going to try to economically annex Canada, so they're going to keep the tariffs in place. I've not really seen anything that suggests that Mark Carney is going to be negotiating a new USMCA. In fact, he talks a lot about diversifying away from the United States
That's right.
and striking trade deals with the rest of the world. And whereas Pierre Poilievre, I do like what he has to say because it's more in line with what I believe in. And he says that as soon as he wins, as soon as he becomes prime minister, he's going to negotiate a new USMCA, which is what we need to happen as soon as possible, because I think honestly, it's daydreaming and it's a fantasy to think that we can just diversify trade away from the United States, given that they are our largest trading partner, and our economic systems are deeply integrated. Our trading relationship is deeply integrated. These things are not going to change overnight.
Yeah, well, I would agree with your opinion, because Canada, the U.S., I'll say it this way as an analogy, we're essentially married. We're connected at the hip, maybe going through a rough patch right now, but we'll get over it, especially with them being our largest trade partner and we're their third largest. They're crucial to both economies. And question on something you just said there, because Mark Carney has used language that specifically we must fundamentally reimagine our economy, or he said statements like the way that we have existed, I'm paraphrasing slightly, with the United States, the way that it has been is over. Like, he's been dramatic in how he's also said it, so he wants to reimagine what that looks like. Pierre Poilievre, at times, from what I remember, has taken a similar stance in that we have to fight Donald Trump tariff for tariff, and we have to show strength and solidarity as well. But you're also mentioning that he wants to renegotiate. Do you think Pierre Poilievre has a slightly different approach in terms of coming to the table?
I think so. I think that's what I heard him say at some campaign stop a couple of weeks ago, that he'd like to get this negotiated as soon as possible, whereas Mark Carney is still talking about tit-for-tat tariffs and that he's going to keep these tariffs in place. But we'll see. All of this is, again, it goes back to what I said initially, which is, it's all background noise. At the end of the day, whoever wins has got to be practical about it. I do think that both Carney and Poilievre are extremely pragmatic individuals.
Interesting. That's a great point with them, and I'm actually encouraged to hear that, your thoughts on Pierre Poilievre, because I've always been very nervous about the idea of going up against tit for tat with the largest economy in the world like that. I just personally don't think that's wise for our economy, especially I think the position we're in as Canadians and Canada. But great thoughts. Thank you for that. It's looking likely it could be a Liberal majority at the end of the election. I'm not making a prediction, but just the way things are moving, that's a very possible outcome. Do you think, if that happens, can we expect a different Liberal Party from what we have seen over the last 10 years? It's essentially the same party, but you have a new face, and Mark Carney has stated things in his defense. He has stated things that he wants to do a more focused approach on the economy and growing our economy, as opposed to Justin Trudeau's focuses. Will it be a different party? What can we expect?
Well, so Carney is a technocrat, and so contrast that to Trudeau. Trudeau's style was more personality-driven. Carney is a former central banker. He's got these global credentials, and he's an economist, and whether anybody likes it or not, I know some people quibble about this. It's not easy to become a central bank governor of two G7 countries. That's not something you just breeze into these positions. You have to have a certain amount of gravitas, I think, to get into these positions. And he did steer the UK out of Brexit. And he was at the helm at the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis, and so he does have very, very good credentials. There's no question about it. Even his critics will have to concede that. I do think that there's some interesting things that he said very early on when he was. I think when he just became prime minister, it was very striking. He referred to Canada's European roots, which is very important to me, because it's a contrast to Justin Trudeau's Canada's a post-national state, and we're all like, we all have different identities, and there's no distinct identity for Canada. So that was an important point that Mark Carney made. He also said something interesting, acknowledging Canada's British, French, and Indigenous roots, and that's also very important. That goes to the core of what does it mean to be Canadian. It's an important part of Canadian identity, which has really been denigrated over the last 10 years. So I have acknowledged that, and I have praised him for it, because it doesn't matter where it comes from. If Jagmeet Singh said this, I would acknowledge that equally. So I think he's been good on that. So that's different from Trudeau. I believe, just based on some of his campaign promises, he appears to be tougher on national security, for example. But I would say that what concerns me is on the environment. He's an ideologue. He's an environmentalist, and we know this from his work as UN Special Envoy on climate change. Right. His praise for Greta Thunberg and his push towards net zero, and the carbon tax. He likes the industrial carbon tax. So could we see the industrial carbon tax actually go up, which would not be good for provinces like Alberta? So I think that's where he has a lot in common with Trudeau on the environmental front. I get the impression Carney is not going to really care much for woke stuff. I think he's a classic progressive liberal Canadian of a type that existed about 20 years ago. Yeah. That's the impression that I get. I don't think he's really into pronouns and so on and so forth. But having said that, I don't think he's going to get rid of any of that. But I don't think Pierre Poilievre's going to get rid of any of that either. I think pronouns and land acknowledgements, I think that they're probably here to stay for the foreseeable future.
Well, there'd be something that happened at the debates that backs that up. He was asked a question by one of the reporters about what's his thoughts on genders, and he essentially responded about two genders, and then went on to be inclusive in terms of want to respect all Canadians and all that. So that would lead to that. You had an interesting thought I want to back up on, because you just opened my eyes a little bit about his comments about European roots and our connection to that, because I actually viewed it a little bit of a different way. I wrote just a little piece about the European Union, Carney, Trump, and Alberta being a wild card, and taking some other comments, again, just putting some pieces together. We have to fundamentally reimagine the way our economy works. Trade with U.S. is essentially over. I kind of had this thought that was leading towards a little bit of, even though we can never be a part of the EU the way it stands, but like a Western counterpart sort of idea, that maybe because he comes from that ideal. But you just opened up a little bit of a different perspective on it, which, anyways, I just want to say I appreciate your thoughts, because that made me think of it in an interesting new way.
Yeah, I think you also have a point. Obviously, when he was in, I don't remember where he said that, but some European capital, and obviously he's doing that to hopefully strike some kind of a trade deal with them. Yes. There's no question that is part of his agenda, but having said that, he didn't really even have to say this, right? He didn't have to say what he said, and so that's what I found interesting. And you could have just dismissed it as a one-off thing, but the thing is, he followed that up with that these are Canada's roots. We're British, French, and Indigenous. I think that's that was, for me, that cemented this idea that I have in my head that he's not ashamed of Canada's roots, and
it's definitely
no one
a
should
change
be.
of.
Yeah.
definitely changed from what Trudeau's comments about being post-nationalist for sure. That was eye-opening.
Yeah.
We're not. I wish we could talk a lot longer. I want to ask you a bit of maybe a fun question for the end here, but we've seen Maxime Bernier making his rounds on some American podcasters, big ones like Patrick Bet-David. I know he's on with Tucker Carlson. What are your thoughts of? It seems like there's a bullseye painted on the Conservatives' backs with Max. I don't want to get into the history of all that, but what are your thoughts on that type of behavior during the election? Any thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure if Maxime Bernier really, I don't know what his agenda is, to be honest with you. Like I was trying to look up for this discussion. I was trying to see where they stand on certain issues. I mean, some of his policy proposals are just not. You can't implement them. They're great ideas, but you can't just wave a wand and implement these policies. It's just the way our country is set up. It's just not something that's practical. But having said that. Him going on these American talk shows and podcasts on the MAGA right, well, that's very interesting, and I think he's really trying to denigrate. It seems like he's denigrating Pierre Poilievre. I mean, his theme is that this is one party, the Liberals and the Conservatives. They stand together on all of these issues. To some extent, he's right. I have written, in one of my pieces for the Free Press that there's very little daylight between these two parties on a range of different issues.
Yes.
They basically agree with each other, but and so Maxime Bernier is very different from them. But then again, I don't think Maxime Bernier is really trying to win an election here. I think he's probably just what the PPC does, which is try to split the Conservative base, split the vote. And I don't know if that's going to happen this time around. I do get the sense on the ground that there are a lot of committed Conservative voters. They might have some issues with Pierre Poilievre. Maybe they feel that he's not specific enough. Maybe they're disappointed that he's now backpedaling on defunding the CBC a little bit. But having said that, I think they're going to stick to the Conservative Party because they want to get the Liberals out, and that's the goal right now.
Yeah. Interesting. No, it's a lot going on with the different party systems that we have here. But Rupa, we're out of time. Always appreciate your thoughts. I wish we could talk a lot longer. Again, we're going to make the long form happen. But thanks for hanging with us today. We'll be back right after this. Well, welcome back to Merit TV Canada's election coverage. Just had a great conversation with Rupa Subramanya. If you missed it, you can go on our YouTube and watch every single thing that we do as well. You can feel free to download our app and all of our information. You can always get caught up through everything as we put it all on our app as we continue to go and build towards April 28th, which is Election Day. I want to urge you as we move into this weekend. It is Easter weekend. We are at the advanced polls, and you have a chance to vote today, tomorrow being Saturday, Sunday, Monday when they close. You can get ahead of the game and get your vote in. If you can't make it this weekend, make sure you make it out on April 28th as Canada goes to the polls. We've been through and assessing a lot of different things, from specifics that each party is running on to different conceptual ideas as to what we should be expecting as citizens of our government. But I want to remind you is that right now we have opportunities to go look at what does each party represent? What is each leader stating they want to achieve? How they're going to do it? You need to be educated to know who are you going to vote for and why are you voting. If someone asks you, why did you vote for this person? I hope you can tell them why. And it's not just because I always voted that way. You should be educated on what the party stands for. Is the things they're proposing going to help Canadians? Is it going to help your children? Is it going to help your grandchildren? Will it put us on a path where we are our growing economy, where we are attracting talent, where we're attracting finance and investment, where we've got education and healthcare systems that are actually doing the job that they're supposed to and not failing? Are we moving in a direction where people are not in this area of food insecurity, where we've seen emergencies across the country of people who are concerned about the food that they can't provide for their family? These are all very important issues that we as Canadians need to answer, and our government needs to be able to provide reasonable responses for this. We can go to the polls. Make sure you do it this weekend. It's been great being with you today. We'll see you back here on Monday. This is Merit TV Canada's election coverage.